Restaurant Unstoppable, episode 720 with Howard Behar. All right, with excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, Howard Behar. Howard, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I am totally unstoppable today.
Yes, that is what we like to hear. So for 21 years, Behar led Starbucks' domestic business as president of North America, and he became the founding president of Starbucks International, opening the very first store outside of North America in Japan. During his tenure, he participated in the growth of the company from only 28 stores to over 15,000 stores, spanning 5 continents. That blows my mind. He served on the Starbucks board of director for 2 years before retiring. Additionally, Howard is the author of It's Not About the Coffee, Leadership Principles from a Life at Starbucks. And he has a second book, The Magic Cup. I have not read that second book, admittedly, but I need to. You just put it on my radar. Thank you so much for doing that. And before we dive into your story, when we find out how you got to where you are, let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us, Howard?
I got 2 for you this morning. There are no stressful situations, only stressful responses.
Yes.
And turn your fear into faith.
All right, let's go through that first one. There's no stressful situations, only stressful responses. Dissect that for us.
Well, basically what it means is that whatever is going on in your life, no matter how stressful it seems, it's not the situation itself, it's the response to the situation. So if something bad happens to you, it's how you respond that determines the outcome.
Yes.
Not the situation itself.
I love it. And we are, by nature, a reactive species. We react. It's what we do. It's what
that's right.
Species do, but we do have that ability to tap the brakes, and I'm guilty of it. We all kind of lose our cool sometimes, but you know, it's so powerful to know that you can choose your reaction, and that's a great way to get this thing started. So, man, you have an incredible story. I listened to your audiobook fully at least twice, went through, made notes throughout the book. It starts, I think it makes sense to start where the story starts for you, as far as what I can tell, and it seems like it started in your parents' grocery store, or is there something that I'm leaving off the table that we need to touch on before we get into that?
No, that was certainly a huge part of it. My dad had this little mom and pop grocery store. He was an immigrant to the United States in the early 1900s and couldn't speak the language, and saved his pennies, nickels, and dimes, and opened up a grocery store that couldn't have been more than 1,500 square feet total. Beautiful. You know, and it was in the north end of Seattle, and you know, I was there every day. You know, after I was born, I was the baby of the family, and my mother was working in the store, and so I would be there every day. Either she was taking care of me there, or after school I would go there.
Yeah. So, how do you distill a childhood worth of lessons, a life worth of lessons from your parents into just a few minutes, right? So during this time, like what impact did this growing up in this grocery store have on you? Take one big lesson that you learned from that experience, or 2. I know it's going to be hard, but just get into that.
Well, one lesson that I can remember, and I didn't realize its importance until much later in life, but one day I was in the grocery store. I was probably maybe 9 or 10 years old, and my dad was up at the counter. He was ringing up the groceries for a customer that was coming in, one of those human beings we call customers. And he said, "Howard, go get me a couple of baskets of strawberries." And so I did. I brought him up to the front counter, and he took those strawberries and he put them in the basket, or in the bag. And the customer left, and I was old enough to realize that he hadn't rung those berries up on the cash register. Now this kind of cash register was one of those ones that had all the different buttons on that represented a different number and a hand crank. That was his cash register.
It's pretty obvious when somebody rings something up. You can't miss it.
Yeah, it was obvious. It'd go bing, like that. Yep. And so I said to him, "Dad, you forgot to ring those up." And he just looked at me and he said, "Son, not everything we do in life should we get paid for, or do we get paid for?" And these people happen to be, they're not just our customers, they're our friends as well. They're our neighbors. And I happen to know they love strawberries, and I also know that they're struggling today financially. And so strawberries are not inexpensive. So it was just my way of saying thank you for being our customer, and I'm glad you're a neighbor and our friend. And I never forgot that lesson, that not everything in life do you need to get paid for. And I think all too often in life, we think we need to be rewarded for everything that we do. We need a pat on the back, or we need extra compensation, or whatever it happens to be. And the truly great things in life, we don't get paid for, and nor should we. The pay that we get is how we feel about ourselves.
So what is that truly great thing? What in this moment, what was the truly great thing that you can't put a price on?
Well, it was the the helping, serving other people.
Mm.
You know, I think we're all put on this earth to serve other people. I don't care whether you're a doctor, lawyer, engineer, fire chief, whether you're a barista. It doesn't make any difference what you do in life. There's only one reason for our existence, and that's serving other human beings.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes it's difficult to make a connection of why you're serving them. If you're a widget maker, for example, making widgets is going to a printing press. It's not easy to take that widget in your own mind and take it all the way to you or me, who gets a newspaper or magazine to inform or entertain us. But that widget maker had something to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's us making those connections that really makes a difference in life.
I love that. And I love, and I think we'll get into this as the story unfolds and as you get into your time at Starbucks, but this idea of just the human element, right? And how to scale a business, we need systems, processes, and procedures, but we need to be able to implement these things without eliminating that ability to empathize and understand somebody's situation and to do what's best in that moment. And maybe we can get into finding that balance as the story unfolds, because I think that's something amazing that Starbucks has done and still does to this day. So I would love to get into that. But any other key lessons from your family from this early time in your life? I know that you spend a lot of time growing at a furniture store, and you really love self-discovery. Does it make sense to get into that right now, or are we cutting?
Well, they're both similar, because what prepared me to lead an organization like Starbucks was the understanding that everything has to do with that one store, right? It's always, what I always call it, it's unit level economics and unit level operations. And unless you're good in that one store, you're not going to be good across 15,000 stores. And so, and I learned so much, because, my dad would hire people. He'd run advertisements in the local newspaper. He'd buy produce. He would sell produce. He would buy meat, sell meat. He had to do all sorts of things. And I got in the furniture business because my brother and my brother-in-law both had furniture stores. And it was the same thing there, and so I got to see all the different pieces of what it was to run a retail business.
Yeah.
And that gave me great strength that many people didn't have.
Yeah. You mentioned unit economics, and how close are you with Chris Schultz from, he's with Voodoo Donuts now, and he was with.
Oh, yeah. I know Chris really well.
Because he brought up unit economics. I'm pretty sure it was him in that conversation, in talking about when do you know it's time to scale? How do you scale? And he said all about unit economics. And if you get into what he means by that, unit economics.
Well, a lot of people say, geez, I'm just going to open a bunch of stores and they'll take care of themselves. But unless you got a unit, one store that's doing well. Now, maybe that store doesn't do well because you picked a bad location. So you might pick a second location just to see, or 3 or 4 to find out what you really have. But they have to work on their own. Mm-hmm. There's no way you can make a multi-unit organization work unless each individual store stands on its own. For not only has to stand on its own from an economic standpoint, from a people standpoint, from a service standpoint, from a cleanliness standpoint, they all have to do their job.
Yes, you just answered my question. What is it? What do you mean by standalone? All these elements, whether it's economic, human, fill in the blank, it has to be self-sustaining. But how do you get to the point where you have thousands of locations and each unit is self-sustaining? What is the secret to being so spread out yet so, I guess, centered around each store at the same time?
Well, that took a long time. You don't go from, I started when there were 28 stores and there were a bunch of stores that weren't making any money, for example, in Chicago. And I'm there 3 months and I realized we have a problem and we're starting to raise money from venture capital firms. We were having a tough time because everybody was saying, well, it works in Seattle, but it's not working in Chicago. And so I moved to Chicago for 3 months trying to figure out what was wrong and trying to fix it. And we did fix it. But you have to make all this work. Now, does every store work? No. But you have to have a base of stores that do work so that you can see your future. You can say, if I do this, this, and this, and this, then those stores should work. And sometimes you make a mistake, sometimes it's a people mistake. Sometimes it's which are hard to fix, but it's once you have a lease signed, it's hard to get out of. But if a person isn't making it in their position, maybe you find another place for them where they can make it, and you get somebody that can do the job.
I love it.
But it all counts.
So when do you know? You said some stores don't work, and no matter what you can do, like some stores just don't work. When do you know it's time to pull the plug on a store if it's not working?
That's an individual thing. You have to. It depends. It depends on how well your other stores are working, and can this store support it for a while. And you work. You do all your things. You have a checklist. You go through. Do I have a people problem? Is there a cleanliness issue? Is there a location problem? Is there a competitive problem? And you look at all those, and you start to turn the dials to see if you can make a change. And most of the time, it's a people issue.
I was just gonna say, and you keep on saying people first. Is it usually people?
Yeah, it's usually a people problem. Usually, it's somebody that just doesn't have the skills to build a loyal base of people coming through the door and building relationships. And usually, that's what it is. Or not being able to keep a store clean, or not being able to hire the right people in the store. It's those kinds of things. Yeah. But you work them all, and then there's a point in time where you say, "Thank you very much." We're done.
I got you. I think we went down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I'm happy we did. There was some good advice in there. So bringing it back to your timeline, how did you find yourself at this furniture store? I mean, I think that was the big next chunk of your life you spent at this furniture store.
It was a family of origin stuff. Brother had a store, brother-in-law had a store. And my dad had retired by the time I was 12. So I was I needed part-time jobs. And so my brother hired me to dust furniture. Okay. And I'd get on the trucks and help deliver furniture.
So you're 12 years old when you started this furniture store. How old were you when you left? I know you spent some time here.
I spent 25 years in the home furnishings industry. I was in my mid to late 30s when I got out of the furniture business.
You really developed. You came into manhood during this time. It must have been a really.
Oh yeah, you learn a lot, and working in those kind of businesses where everything matters. You got to sell stuff, you got to deliver stuff, you got to buy stuff, you got to advertise stuff. All of it goes together to make it work.
Yeah, there are some lessons I pulled from your book that I definitely want to touch on. But before, I'm just curious, if you could sum it up, like what were the biggest people, or who were the biggest people, or the biggest lessons you've had during this 25 years run at the furniture store that we can reflect on in our time today?
Well, I had so many mentors along the way. I had. When I worked at Levitt's Furniture after I left my family's business, I worked at Levitt Furniture for a while, and I had a guy named Gene Borzik, and he was kind of one of the original guys at Levitt's. And I don't know if you remember Levitt's or not, but it started in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, and it became a big chain. And Gene was he was the store manager, and he taught me so much about how to work. I really didn't know how to work.
What do you mean by that?
That you got to give it your all, and it's this whole idea. It's where I figured out that balance in life wasn't the key. It was integration. Yeah. You had to make it all work together, work, home, recreation, everything had to kind of fit together. There was no such thing as balance. And Gene taught me that. And so I became a really hard worker. I mean, I would be there all hours of the day. I'd be the one out picking the cigarette butts out of the parking lot. And so, that was a big thing. Another guy, I
got to jump in real quick because it's like you're reading my mind. There's no such thing as work-life balance. And what I was saying, it's like you read my mind. I made a note, and I was hoping that this would come up in today's conversation. If it didn't, I was going to make sure it came up. You quoted something along the lines of, your life's work is still your life's work, which is something that, I mean, it's kind of out of context, but you had this moment where you were laying down in bed and you were like kind of depressed that like you're retiring and like, how am I going to do? And this quote came into your mind, your life's work is still your life's work. And how did that resonate with you?
Well, at that time I had retired from Starbucks, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I used to always warn people at Starbucks, you're not Starbucks and Starbucks is not you. You were a whole person before you came to Starbucks, and you'll be a whole person when you leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I fell into the trap because Starbucks was really, as much as it was Howard Schultz's baby, it was my baby too, because I was there so early, and I really brought the people idea that it was all about the people to Starbucks. So I was enmeshed.
Yeah.
I was in a long-term relationship and totally in love, and then I retire, and now what the hell's my life about?
Yeah.
And it was a disaster. It took me 2 years to get my footing back, and I got depressed. And I was laying on the sofa in Palm Springs, in my house in Palm Springs, and I really was thinking. I was reading a book, and I was thinking my life wasn't worth living. And which is a hard, long way to go. Now I wasn't, so serious. I wasn't serious about killing myself. But the point is what's my life about? And as I'm laying there, all of a sudden these words came into my head. Hey, Howard, your life's work is still your life's work. Your life's work is still your life's work. Came out of nowhere, out of thin air. And I said, yeah, that's true. My life's work is still my life's work. And my life's work was about people.
Mm.
My mission in life is to nurture and inspire the human spirit every day, beginning with myself first and then for others. And that's how I live my life. And that's how I was living my life at Starbucks. Yeah. Did we sell and serve coffee? Yes, we did. But that was not my life's work, selling a cup of coffee. I enjoyed doing it and it was fun. But what my life's work was developing people.
Yeah. I mean, Starbucks was just a vehicle for you to live your life's work.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
So you could do your life's work. It was just provided the means, but you're not defined by that. But I love that you said that, because I love to say myself that there's no such thing as work-life balance. There's only your life's work. And if you live intentionally enough to you know your purpose, and we're going to get into this. When you know what your hat is, we're going to get into it real soon. You can live intentionally to the point where your life is just your work, because it's so aligned, and it's
exactly. And that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
You want a fulfilling life, wear one hat, right? Yeah. In other words, align your whole life around who you are as an individual, which I call wearing your hat.
Hat. And that's a great segue into one of the lessons you picked up working as a young man. We talked about this one mentor that influenced you. I think it was Gene. He taught you how to work, right?
Yeah.
And then there was another lesson you learned about and I think basically when you say wearing, what do you mean by finding your hat? What does that mean? Finding your hat?
Well, there was another mentor, a guy named Jim Jensen, who's still a good friend today. And he was the one that got me to, first of all, to believe that I could do it. I could do anything I set my mind to do. I never thought about life in those terms. And the other thing he did, he introduced me to servant leadership. And, I didn't understand what servant leadership was about. Robert Greenleaf came up with the term, but the beginning of servant leadership is you need to figure out who you are as a person. And I went through some struggles in a company that I was at where the CEO of the company wanted me to be something different than who I was. Although the problem was I didn't know who I was. So when he said, Howard, I want you to change, I was saying, change from what? Because I thought I was being okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, if you want to be a great executive, then you're going to have to learn not to show your emotions. So and the other thing, if you want to be a great executive, you're going to have to learn not to say anything when somebody asks you a question, but show that you're really a thoughtful person, And so that was counter totally to who I was. I didn't realize who I was, but it was counter to how I acted. And so, I got severely, another time in my life when I was really had high anxiety because I was trying to become something that another person wanted me to become. And I didn't have any defense against that. I couldn't say, well, yeah, but here's who I am. And why are the things you're asking important? And so I began that journey of identifying who Howard was. And
when
I read this.
When did it start for you? I know, sorry to interrupt. You were 12 years old when you got at the furniture store.
Yeah, it was about 27 when I did this work.
Got you.
And so somebody gave me a book or said to buy a book, and I bought it. And it was basically about learning about yourself, developing yourself. First chapter of the book said, first thing you want to do is identify what your 8 core values are and how those values inform the decisions and actions you take in your life. And so you have to write something about it. So you can't just say, I'm honest. you have to, if there's honesty could be a core value, say, what things will you not tell a white lie about? What, how do you want, what does honesty mean to you? Are there times when you might be dishonest? And if those are, why? So you have to define what honesty means. Then the second chapter of the book talked about creating a mission statement for yourself. And so in those days, I was 27, that was almost 50 years ago. There were mission statements, you're kidding me. Nobody talked about it in those terms. Probably there were people, but that was new to me. And so I did. And at that time I was in the home furnishing business. So my mission statement was to be one of the most, wanted to be totally a respected leader in the home furnishings industry. Pretty base stuff. And which has changed, from then. I'll get to that in a minute. And then the third chapter of the book talked about, in a paragraph or in some words, define how you want to live your life. And that's when I came up with my 6 P's. The 6 P's are these. The first P is everything I do in life has to have a purpose greater than myself, right? It has to have meaning. The widget maker making a widget that goes into a printing press and the company delivers a magazine or a newspaper to inform or entertain somebody. So I have to make that connection, a purpose greater than myself. If I have that, then I might as well be passionate about it. So I don't want to be just on a line making widgets and not really feel great about what I'm doing. And I want to be passionate, even if it's just making widgets. I want to be excited, enthusiastic about making those widgets. And that's passion. Then the next P is persistence. In the river of life, there are rocks, and we don't know where the rocks are. And every once in a while, we smack into one. It may be a rock that somebody has put there, and maybe a rock that just was buried, just under the surface of the water, and we go boom like that. And we have to figure out in life how to get over, under, around, or through those rocks, or change our course.
And that's persistence. We're still on persistence.
That's persistence. Yeah, that's persistence. I'll tell you the one word that I would describe every entrepreneur that I've ever known: persistence. That would be it.
I love it.
That they are persistent. Then the fourth P is patience. And you'd say persistence and patience, aren't those opposites of each other? How do those go together? Well, they do, because persistence doesn't mean that you aren't patient about your journey. Sometimes you hit that rock, and if you jump out of the boat because you think that's the reaction that you need to do, that old no stressful situations, only stressful responses. The stressful response is jump out of the boat. When you might be just patient because the current will take you around that rock.
Yes.
And so sometimes you just have to be patient with your journey. And most important person you have to be patient with is yourself.
Yeah, and if you're playing the long game, which I hope most people are, if you're playing the long game, well, guess what? The long game takes time. You have to.
Yeah, the long game takes time. Yeah,
exactly.
Starbucks wasn't successful right out of the gate. Howard Behar certainly wasn't. You're talking to a guy that barely got out of high school, had 2 years of community college. My best subject was beer when I started, and I became an aficionado of single malt scotches by the time I left junior college, community college. So, it was a journey for me of finding my way, believing in myself, learning lessons, learning what worked, what didn't work, etc., trying to decide who I was, how that was going to inform what I did with my life. So then the fifth P is performance. That's one thing human beings don't like to be measured. We just don't. Teachers don't want to be measured. They want to measure their students, but they don't want to measure themselves. Sometimes business leaders don't want to be measured. People hate performance reviews, right? Mm-hmm. And I can understand why, because they're always somewhere in the future about talking about the past, when real performance review is in the moment.
Yes.
Yeah, right? Not somewhere out in the future. And you're not talking about the past, you're talking about now. And so, performance matters. If your responsibility at home is to take out the garbage, then you damn well better be taking out the garbage. If you're married and you have a commit to a monogamous relationship, then that means you have a monogamous relationship. That's performance. If you commit to your boss to get something done at a certain time, that's performance. If you commit to making, your budget, that's performance. Now, we don't always get done what we say we're going to get done. And the key to it is to making sure that we're letting the people that we might disappoint early in that journey. I might not make this happen. Or, honey, I'll get to the garbage later. I just can't get it done. I'm in a hurry. Whatever it happens to be. So performance is the fifth one. Then the sixth P is people. Everything we do in life is about people. It goes back to the idea that there's nothing we do in life that isn't about serving people. So those are my 6 Ps. And then my mission statement I gave you already, but it's to nurture and inspire the human spirit every day, beginning with myself first and then others. The reason why I say self first is what I've learned in life after living for almost 76 years, is that if you're not okay with you, very difficult to do something for somebody else.
Man, I love this. And again, those 6 Ps, starting with A, purpose, 2, passion, 3, persistence, 4, patience, 5, performance, and 6, people. Thank you. And what are those 6 Ps? Just one more time. Like, you just call them the general 6 Ps, or?
No, they're how I live my life.
I love it.
There's how I do things. So you come to me with an idea. You want me to volunteer for a nonprofit. Somebody comes to me, and maybe I have some time, but I want to know what this place is about.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk to people before I agree to join. I want to talk to people that work there. I want to talk to people that are getting a benefit from this organization. And I want to see, do I connect? Because not everything that comes to you do you connect with.
Yes.
And so I need to connect. And that's where the greater purpose comes into. That organization, maybe I don't connect, but another person does.
Yes.
And that's where that comes from. Purpose.
You're dropping gold on us right now. And I just want to kind of go aerial real quick to paint the big picture. What we're talking about right now is wearing your hat, learning about who you are. And what Howard is doing is taking us through a journey, painting a picture of what it looks like to figure yourself out. It sounds cheesy that we create our own core values. It sounds cheesy to have a mission statement. It sounds cheesy to find out what honesty means to me. But the thing is, you have to do this self-exploration before. You have to know who you are, what your strengths are, what your purpose is, to live intentionally, to have a life's work. And it sounds like you went through this late in your 20s, and you found that path. And what happened when you started fully understanding who you were and what your hat worn right looks like? Get into that.
Well, let me give you a quote first. If you don't know who you are or where you're going, any path will get you there. And I wanted to be intentional about who I was. And so I really started to get focused. I created out of that exercise, I created a picture in words of Howard. About 50 words describes Howard. Mm-hmm. I've carried that with me for almost 50 years. And it's changed over time, but it has my core values, has my mission, has my 6 Ps. And so because sometimes I forget, under stress, sometimes I'll forget who I am and what I stand for. So that turned into what I call my hat. So that picture of Howard in 50 words or less became, in 1 word, 2 words, my hat. Mm-hmm. And my hat, basically, you've always heard some people say, well, I have to wear 20 different hats. I'm not talking about that hat. I'm not talking about the hat about being a parent and having to bring home the bacon and teach your kids, not those hats. I'm talking about the hat that you wear that informs who you are. Mm-hmm. So you get up in the morning and you look across the bed and you look at your partner, their significant other or spouse, and you say, I better put on my spouse hat. Well, if you're doing that, then you're probably with the wrong person. If you go to work and you walk through the front door of Starbucks and you said, I better put on my Starbucks hat, you're probably working at the wrong company, because you should be able to wear your hat no matter where you are. Yeah. Your hat should be, if you want to have a fulfilling life, then you got to be wear your own hat no matter where you are. And whether you go home to your parents' house, I don't know about you, but when I was, and I would go home to my parents' house and my mother would cook dinner, I would become this 10-year-old all over again. I might have been 40 years old. And I would wait for her. I'd sit in the chair and wait for her to put dinner on the table, and and I became that child again. But that's not the hat that I wanted to be wearing at that time of my life. So I had to be the adult then.
Yes, man, I'm loving this. And a couple of things that you mentioned that I just want to put a spotlight on real quick. Sometimes you forget who you are. And when you make a decision about your life and your business, it's so important to write these things down, because when you need to self-correct, when you need to get back on that center line, it's there. You cemented it. And it's easy as opening your wallet and pulling out that piece of paper to get back on track. And that's why it's so important to write these things down. You also,
if you don't write them down, you're not committed.
Yes.
That's just an exercise in talk. And it's not, you don't mean it, right? It's like writing goals down. If you don't write your goals down, if you just say, well, someday I'd like to be, fine, write it down.
Yeah. And the other thing that you mentioned that I think is really important to understand, because this can be really intimidating, right? To commit to these things for the rest of your life that you're writing down. But here's the thing, it changes. You can, there's no rule that says once you write it down, you can't change it, because we as people evolve. We change ourselves.
Write it in pencil.
Yes, exactly. But just write something down. Choose a direction and start going there. And then as long as it's heading generally north, you can hone into a single degree over time. But just start moving in the general direction. And I just want to bring those two little nuggets that you dropped. With all this has been gold, but I want to make sure my listeners heard that. You also mentioned the idea of you're always wearing your hat. And one lesson that we've learned at Restaurant Unstoppable is that the best restaurants out there are just an extension of the people behind the restaurant.
That's right.
The idea of concepts. Right? Because how can you show up every day to a concept? Because you have to put that different friggin' hat on every time, right? But if you can show up to an extension of yourself, how much easier is that?
Yeah, it's like the word brand. I hate that word brand. And I know we all use it, but I always tell marketing people, I'm not a brand. I'm a human being. And if I'm working for Starbucks, Starbucks is not a brand. Starbucks is me.
Exactly.
And all the people that is a reflection of all the people that work at Starbucks. You know, a brand is you can run an ad for your product to appeal to 82-year-old women that have gray hair and a purple earring in one ear. And you can, that's what brands do. They run advertisements to appeal to anybody they want. But who are they and what do they stand for? And why do people work there? Why are they committed to working there? And that's it.
Howard, I'm loving this conversation. I really am. Thank you so much for coming on. We're back. And I think now is a good time to start talking about the transition into Starbucks. There was one little job you took in between Starbucks and the furniture. Is it worth mentioning that before we get into Starbucks?
Well, yeah, because it was the first time I'd ever been able to lead a company. Mm-hmm. So my mentor at Starbucks left to go to a land development company. And not my mentor at Starbucks, but my mentor at Grantry, for the furniture business, went to a land development company. And he invited a bunch of people to join. It took me a couple of years before I decided to join because I was hooked on the furniture business. But finally I joined and I went to this company and I was there a few years. The company got in trouble and I raised my hand and say, I'd like to lead this company. And I got the opportunity. I don't know why, because what kind of non-college graduate gets to be president of a public company? Not very many. No. And so I got the opportunity, and it was when I really started. I got my MBA because the company was in trouble. It had cash problems, and I had to figure out what to do. And every day the workout guys at the Bank of Boston were calling me about how's the cash position, and they were bleeding the cash off the bank accounts. And I was working 18 hours a day trying to figure out how to make it work. And finally it came to the point where we just weren't going to make it work, and we decided we would sell the company. And it's where I learned that sometimes you just have to put the keys on the table. And I said to the workout group, look, if you want to run it, you run it. And all of a sudden, I realized that I had more power than I thought I had, because the last thing that the bankers want to do is run your company. They just want to keep the pressure on you. And so I got my MBA, and I really started to understand how business really worked at that point in time. And then a company bought us, and I ended up with a golden parachute by accident. And I had a couple of years to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And so I did, and I decided I wasn't going to work for a company again. I was going to buy a company. Okay. And so I got interested in the specialty food industry. And I looked at a bunch of tea business. I looked at the ice cream business. And I looked at a company called Hickory Farms, which I settled in on. It was a franchise, Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, that friends of mine owned. And so they were going to sell it to me for 1x cash flow, which was an incredible deal.
Yeah.
And so problem is I didn't have any money. And my brother-in-law was the only one that I knew that had any money. And so I went to my brother-in-law and I said, I'd like to buy this company. Can you loan me the money to buy it? And he said, sure, but I want to go talk to somebody first. And I'm going to back up a second, because out of this other company, it was called Thousand Trails. When I left that company, I was trying to figure out what to do. And I had a friend that was an investor in early stage Starbucks. When Howard Schultz bought the company from the founders of Starbucks, he was on Howard's board. It was about maybe 10 or 15 stores at the time. And he said, you ought to talk to Howard Schultz. And so I went and I talked to Howard Schultz, and it seemed kind of interesting. But Howard had a list of 10 things that he was looking for. He wanted a VP of operations. Well, the first thing on the list was college graduate. I didn't have that. Mm-hmm. Second thing on the list was food and beverage experience. I didn't have that. And finally, we get down to number 10. Can you breathe? Yes, I could breathe. That was the only thing that I qualified for on that list. So we said, thank you very much. We passed it. Nice to meet you, and on my way. And about a year, as I'm looking for this business, and I got my brother-in-law says, I want to go talk to somebody who knows something about franchising. He says, here's where I want to meet. And it happens to be the Starbucks office building, the little old Starbucks office building. And we're going to meet a guy named Jack Rogers, who was kind of like Howard's original investor. And he was looking out for the investors' money. So he was hanging out around Starbucks a lot. So we went to meet with Jack, and I was pitching my heart out about why I wanted to buy this company, why I thought I'd do well at it. And Jack just looked at me and said, why do you want to do that? We need a guy like you right here at Starbucks. You could have heard my brother-in-law's sigh of relief all the way down to Los Angeles from Seattle, that he wouldn't have to load me money if I got a job, right? And I said, well, I've talked to Howard already, and he had a different list, and I don't think I fit. He said, well, things have changed, and we haven't filled that position yet, and you would be perfect for that. And so, I met with Howard again and a bunch of people, and I said to Howard, Howard, look, why don't you let me work in the company for a week? You look at me, I'll look at you, I'll work for free, no time cards, nothing. And so I did. I want to work in the plant, I want to work on the trucks, and I want to work in the stores. And I did that for a week. And I came back after that week there, and I said, this is a place that I could attach to. And I for some reason got right away that it wasn't about coffee, that it was about people.
Yes.
And so I said to Howard, I said, if you're interested in me, I'm interested in Starbucks. And he extended an invitation for me to join Starbucks. And that, I turned right instead of turning left. Instead of going to my own business, I went to work for Starbucks. But Starbucks became my own business because it was so early. And my inclination was that. I didn't need a job. I didn't want a job. I wanted to commit to something. And, I never had any idea Starbucks would become what it became. I thought it was going to be this nice little coffee company, Washington, Oregon, maybe a little California. Never did I understand what it would become. And, the rest is kind of history.
What was it about you, Howard, in that those first encounters that made you so right for the job? It was this the gentleman, the second name, Jack. Was it Jack?
Jack, yeah.
What was it what made you right for the job? What did he see in you? If you, you can't put yourself into his shoes physically and have his perspective, but if you had to guess, what would it be?
No, I know what it was.
What was it?
It was my commitment to people. I was, by that time now, I'm 44 years old. I was formed as a leader. I was going to continue to learn and to grow, certainly, but I was who I was. My hat was so set on my head. I was never going to go through what I had gone through before with that CEO wanting to change who I was. That just was not going to happen. And so I was formed, and Jack, I think, saw that. And I'd been a customer of Starbucks for 17 years. I loved coffee.
Yeah.
And so, those kind of things fit. And I think he identified with that. And I think the people I interviewed with understood what my commitment was. And so I brought that to Starbucks. Starbucks was really about coffee at that point in time.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, it wasn't about people. Everything was about coffee. We were going to be the coffee experts, and we were going to let everybody know that we were the coffee experts, and we were going to tell our customers how much we knew, and they better listen to us. And I got in there and I said, that's not how we're going to act. We're going to give our customers what they want and what they need. And yes, we can inform them about coffee, are the ones that want that. But the ones that don't, that just want a good cup of coffee hot or want a pound of coffee, we're going to do that.
Yeah. So, he saw in you that you're about people, but you also said that after you spent about a week there, you slowly start to realize that Starbucks was also about people. So
Well, it could become about people.
yeah,
That we weren't in the coffee business serving people. See, Starbucks at that point saw themselves as in the coffee business,
mhm,
and I said we're not in the coffee business serving people. We're in the people business serving coffee.
mhm.
Sounds like a small play on words, but it's huge. And that, believe it or not, that little saying has stuck at Starbucks over all these years.
I love it. And what I mean, paint that picture of what about people looks like, and that's kind of a broad question, but are you picking up what I'm putting down? What does it look like to be an organization that's about the people?
That is, when it's about the people, that means every decision that you make, you think about its effect on the people that are working in the organization and the people you're serving and the people you're buying from and the people in the communities in which you live. Every decision you make has to be made based on your commitment to serving those people. And we serve our customers in different ways. We serve the people that work in the company kind of different ways, but it's always treating them all with respect and dignity.
Yes.
And always loving them and caring about them.
Yes, and I'm so happy that you're getting into this, because you talk a lot in your book. I think you dedicate at least 2 chapters to the trust and
Yes.
how trust and respect are kind of go hand in hand. So,
Yes.
uh, get into trust. Get into why trust is such a keystone in a people forward business. What is trust?
Trust is everything.
Mm.
In life, trust is everything. You cannot have a relationship unless you have trust.
So, how do you
Right?
how do
So
you get it?
I always believe in giving trust before you get trust.
Hmm.
You give love before you get love. And so that means somebody that you make an acquaintance. You don't all of a sudden, because you meet somebody, you don't immediately distrust them. And that's a pretty dark way to live life. And, so you give trust. Hey, this is a nice person. I'd like to get to know more about this person. Now, maybe over time you find out that this person likes to shoplift. You go with him and you go into a drugstore and all you see him put something in his pocket. Well, all of all of a sudden, do you trust that person anymore? No.
Not
All of
really.
a sudden you see how they act. And that's the same way at work. You build relationships at work, people you work with. So you always give trust. You always trust them first until they prove they're unworthy of trust. And, and people think that, well, people should trust you before you trust them. No, it's not that way. It's the other way. And so, but trust makes the world go round. Right? Do you have a significant other? Are you married or anything?
Nah, who's got time for that?
Okay, you don't have to. You have friends.
I do have plenty of friends, yes.
Yeah. Do you trust them?
I like to think I do.
Okay. So you can't have a good relationship without trust.
Mhm.
If you're married, how can if your significant other is fooling around on the side, can you have trust in that person?
Nope.
Okay. And that you can't trust them. How can you have a relationship? It
No.
doesn't work. And that's the same way in business. If the people you're serving, those people human beings we call customers, don't trust you, how can you have a relationship with them?
Well, how do you?
And so when you break trust, right? When you break trust with a customer, they may come back to you once or twice more, but they'll find another place to go.
What's the most common way you break trust with a customer?
Is how you treat them by not respecting them. You break trust when you don't treat them with respect and dignity when they come through that door, and not paying attention to them, not listening to them, not only listening to them with your ears, but listening to them with your eyes.
What is
Right?
that like? Listening to it with your eyes?
It's just paying attention to how they're focused. Where are their eyes? What's their face look like? Smile on their face, frown on their face, tension in their face, non-tension, relaxed face, and being responsive to that.
So one of the things you mentioned in your book, and you might have mentioned it, and if you did, I apologize for missing it, is that you build trust with good communication. And this is something that we would spend a lot of time talking about today. Into that. So give us a lesson on good communication and how good communication builds trust.
Well, communication is everything, right? Let's say that you're married and you've been together a long time. The only way to have a long-term relationship is if you have really good communication. If you listen to each other, if you talk with each other, if you save up all your stuff, oh God damn it, he left those damn socks on the floor again. Oh, that damn toilet seat. If he leaves that and pees on that toilet rim one more time, I'm gonna kill him. If he comes home late every night, he says he's gonna be home by 6 o'clock, right? You're gonna have, if you wait until all those things build up and then you go, boom, you asshole, why am I married to you? Right? That's not good communication, right?
Yeah.
Good communication is conversing all the time. Good things, bad things, whatever it happens to be. That's the same thing in the workplace. And so, in order to have trust, you have to have good communications.
So
you have to be talking to each other with love in your heart, always thinking the positive about intentions of the other people as best as you can. And when you do that, then you build trust.
So good communication is about constant communication.
Yeah, it's constant.
Not waiting for things to build up and then
Oh.
to say something, but in the moment. This is kind of goes
That's
back to what you were saying earlier with performance.
Yeah.
Performance.
They're a waste. They're a waste.
Performance review.
I mean, think about performance reviews.
Yeah.
Every 6 months, I'm going to give you a performance review. So I go back and I made notes over those 6 months. And you say, I remember that day in June 1st, and you did X, Y, and Z. God, that was not very good. You need to fix that.
Yeah.
That doesn't work, does it?
Nope.
No. And so good communication and performance reviews are in the moment. You see something going on that was good, and you say, hey, Jim, God, I really love the way that you presented that information. That was outstanding. And here's what I liked about it. Or, hey, Jim, if you might want to think about the words you used when you were, and it's ongoing and often. It's all the time. And it's not, that's what makes it work. And that's what performance reviews are all about. They're not reviews. It's good communication. That's how you build trust.
So good communication, and I can't help but think of our friend, don't know him personally, but I would love to get to know him, Danny Meyer, who says constant gentle pressure. And it's that constant gentle pressure of correcting and communicating, both good and bad communicate. Like you did that wrong, you did this right, but it's that you're not correcting the process, or you're not correcting the person, you're correcting the process, right?
You're correcting the process, and you do it with love in your heart.
Yeah.
You got to assume that everybody wants to do the right things right. That's what you got to start there. And when they don't, then who owns it? You do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you're talking to people, when you're coaching, it's always with love in your heart.
I love it. There's one other thing that and I don't mean to give your whole book away. I think we're still leaving a good chunk of the good stuff.
You can give it away.
But I love this. I highlighted the crap out of this, Howard, when I was reading it, and I went back to read it again before today's conversation. And it's the first time I ever heard of this until reading your book was compassionate emptiness. And a part of the good communication, I think what you're saying is it's a constant gentle pressure of correcting people in the moment and giving them feedback in the moment. It takes that for trust, but it also takes compassionate emptiness. What the heck is compassionate emptiness, Howard?
Okay, before I answer that, I don't want to leave what you just said go away. It's not just correcting, right? It's coaching and reinforcing good behavior. People do, that old, what's the old saying, or that old, it was in the 1 Minute Manager, about catch people doing the right things right. If you're always catching them doing the things wrong, that's the way you move people forward, is when you see them doing something right, not when you just see them doing something wrong, and you reward them and recognize them for doing the right things. So compassion and emptiness. When I was, it took me a long time to learn this. And I don't remember, I was probably in my late 40s, and I was reading this book. And I'm a quote guy. I had quotes on my office wall, hundreds of quotes. And that's the way I learned, no college degree. So quotes were important to me because they informed me and they reminded me about things. And I always was struggling with my wife. She's a very smart woman. She is an oncology social worker. And, men have a bad habit. We always want to solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
Well, women don't always want you to solve their problem. They want you to listen, not solve your problem. And that's the same at work. People don't want you to solve their problem. They want you to listen to them, maybe offer some coaching, but you have to ask permission for coaching first, right? And so compassion emptiness means this. being compassionate about the person, right? Listening to them, hearing what they're not saying, asking them questions, but empty of opinions, empty of solutions.
That's hard.
It's hard to do.
It's real.
Hard to do. And I'm not a perfect person to be talking about it, but I try to do it.
I think just being mindful that it's a possibility is a start,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's something that I have to deal with every day with these interviews is like, I have points I want to make, but I got to learn to shut that inner voice down and just listen.
Yes.
And, but what is the significance of that? Why is it so, what's happening in compassionate emptiness of this idea of shutting down what's going, the inner dialogue just to be receiving, taking it in? Like, why is that so powerful? Do we know the science behind it?
People don't care how much you know. They want to know how much you care. And it shows that you care. Yeah. Being knowledgeable or knowing an answer to something is not what people need. Yeah. So if you're trying to grow somebody in your organization, then trying to give them all the answers and the solutions doesn't help them grow, does it? And so you need to be able to do that. But it just says, I respect you. I respect who you are. You don't need me to tell you what to do. You're more than capable of figuring this out. Now, if you want an answer, if you want to know my opinion, then I'm happy to give it to you. But I'm always going to ask permission first.
Yeah. And if you just listen and ask questions, 9 times out of 10, these people are going to solve the problem.
They'll solve their own problem. And
that's what you want to be doing. You want to be getting these people, your team members, to be solving their own problems and creating, I think what's the term you use? Thinking individually, pardon my, you have a chapter, the person who sweeps should choose the broom or whatever. Yeah. I'm butchering the quote, but it's that mentality that like you want an organization of individuals and you want to empower people to think and to
you don't want all blonde hair, blue eyed, all the same. You want people that bring different experiences in life and have different ideas and different reactions to things. It's same at home, by the way. Everything that we're talking about here is applicable to your life, not to just work. We're talking a lot about the context of work, but it's your home life too. It all fits together. And the things you practice at work, most of the time work at home. And the things you work at home, well, you can practice at work.
So Howard, we're back. We covered a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about in today's conversation came to the surface organically, and I'm super, super grateful for that. We still have like 20 years of time at Starbucks, and obviously we can't cover every moment, every year of that experience, but reflecting back at your time at Starbucks, give me like a couple like instances where either you or Starbucks grew significantly. And let's try to dissect that and try to take let's try to replicate this in our own lives and our businesses. So moving along that timeline, you're with Starbucks. You realize that there are people, organization, help them scale to 15,000 locations. What were the evolutionary points with Starbucks that you can pinpoint, or just one or two key ones?
Well, I think the first evolution was when we figured out that this was much bigger than we thought. And how that took place was we started to open stores closer and closer together. And finally, I was up in Vancouver, British Columbia, and there's a corner called Robson and Thurlow. And it's the corner of Main and Main.
Okay.
And there was a Starbucks store on one of the corners. And it was a little tiny store at about 900 feet. And it was doing $1 million a year. Wow. Big volume for 900 square feet. And it had a demolition clause in the lease. It was an old building. And I was sure that the landlord was going to one day boot us out and rebuild that building because it only made sense. It was a single-story little store. And so I said to our real estate person when we were up there, see if you can get a piece of real estate kitty corner across the street. And it happened to be a heritage building. So I thought it would take us a year at least if we were ever going to get it. And 6 months later, her name was Tracy Halgrimson, and she came back and she said, Howard, I've got that store. And I said, oh, shit. Now what am I going to do? And because, we had that store, and I said, well, let's take it because we don't know. And if it, we'll try it, and we can always sublease a store across the street. I didn't know what was going to happen. The day we opened that second store, our volume on that corner doubled. We had 2 stores doing $1 million a year.
Wow.
One store we called the Bikers, and one store we called the Suits.
Okay.
And that's how different the customer base was. And that's when I really knew this thing was bigger than any of us thought. So we started opening stores closer and closer together, and it worked. You know, we'd have stores less than a block apart, and it would work. We'd have stores in a grocery store. Then we'd have a store in that shopping center, and we might have another store across the shopping center. Matter of fact, in Seattle, we have one that has, in a shopping mall area, we have 4 stores. Yeah. And so, you know, that's the first thing. That was a huge transition. And that's when we realized this was bigger than we thought.
So you realized bigger than what you thought when you could open stores within a certain proximity from each other.
Yeah.
What does it take to get to that point? What's the tipping point where you're able to do that? Because I mean, I think at a certain point, if you're still like a smaller mom and pop with say 5 or 10 locations, that fear of cannibalizing your business is true. But what was?
Yeah, well, at 5 or 10, we weren't cannibalizing.
Yeah.
It was not till we hit about when we really realized what it was when we got close to 200 stores.
Okay, so
up until that point, we were pretty spread out.
So what was the tipping point that allowed you to do that? That I think that's not something that everybody can achieve, or is it?
No, it's not. It's a unique business. You know, coffee is a unique product. If you drink coffee, you drink coffee, right? And the demand for quality coffee was everywhere. Remember, every restaurant served a cup of coffee. There might be 10 restaurants in one street, or in McDonald's and Burger, whoever there was. And they're all serving coffee. So there was lots of coffee sales. And so the demand was bigger than what we thought it was. There were more people that wanted to come into our stores than we thought. And so it was just experimentation. The second major step, when we realized that people didn't want to just come and leave, they wanted to be able to sit down and have a conversation, even if they didn't buy a cup of coffee. And so, you know, we started experimenting. Up until that time, I don't remember when we had about 50 stores, we only had 5 bar stools in the window, or maybe a little table or with a couple of chairs to sit on. And all of a sudden we realized people wanted to come. We had a huge internal battle inside the company. Well, how can we afford to do that? We can't just get bigger stores, right? That'll change the unit level economics, back to the unit level economics again. So we started building some bigger stores to see what would happen, adding more chairs. Lo and behold, what happened? Our business increased because people like you wanted to have a meeting there. We even built some stores with meeting rooms. And so, you know, that changed the business. Then as we started to expand geographically, it didn't always work right away. We were used to opening stores and having cash flow immediately. And we started to open in Denver, we opened in San Diego. Those took about a year. But we had to stay with it. Remember, persistence and patience. So we had to stay with those stores. Finally, those markets caught on. We realized then it began so we could open in a new market immediately. It took off because people knew us by that time. Even though we didn't have a store in their area, they knew who we were. And so there were steps. The biggest issue that we always had is that we never had enough good people. We were always behind the curve. And it was always finding the right people to get on the bus and then making sure that the wrong people left the bus, as Jim Collins says.
Yeah.
And so that was always an issue. And it became an issue until we hit the downturn in 2007, 2008. Then all of a sudden we had too many people.
So 2 things. One, you mentioned using persistence to let a community kind of get to know you and adopt and accept you. And the other thing was not only finding the right people to get them on the seats of your bus, but also getting people off your bus. I want to touch on both of those things, but pulling back a layer on how you get these communities to accept you. I mean, I'm sure that's persistence too.
Yeah.
But how do we do that? How do we get, what were you doing? What techniques were you using to get a community to know, like, and trust you?
So that brings us all the way back to the beginning. Everything you do in life is about serving people. And if that becomes your mindset, then how you treat those people when they come through that door is everything. If you treat them with respect, with dignity, as a valued human being, if you listen to them, if you smile when it's appropriate, right? If you learn their names, if you know their drinks, you know, and they walk through that door, and by the time they get there, their drink is ready, right? It's amazing what those kind of things do. Starbucks was about building relationships. It's just like a restaurant that you frequent often. If you walk into that restaurant, and like Glenn and I have a restaurant we love called Tillicum in Seattle, little small cafe like a New York cafe, and we love going there. We walk in and the waitress always says, "Howard and Lynn, how you doing? We haven't seen you for a while." Are you kidding me? I will never leave them. And that's the same at Starbucks, and that's what made Starbucks work. At the end of the day, it's certainly the coffee was good. The coffees are art. It had to be good, but anybody could do that. There are 21 other coffee companies when I started at Starbucks in the business. Many of them had more stores than we did. We focused on the people, on that interaction and that relationship between us and those human beings that we serve, and that's what made it work.
So what was the secret for you in Starbucks because Howard, you couldn't be in every Starbucks, right? And there's thousands of them. How are you how are these young people that you're hiring, how are you getting them to give an F about the people? What things did you do to make sure they gave that F? Like, get into
Well, it's difficult and simple all at the same time. It's how you treat them that makes that work. You can't be pounding them on, "Hey, how are sales? How come your sales are down?" You say, what's going on with you? Get your store cleaned up, right? All those things. I remember I retired once, and I came back from retirement. And I walked into a store, and on the back wall in the back room was a sign: "Be nice, be fast, be clean." And I looked at that sign. I just ripped it off the wall, and I said, "How about we put up a sign: Be human." Those fast food slogans: be nice, be fast, be clean. I want you to be human. That's what I want you to be. You'll be whatever those other things are, but we got to have clean stores, but that's not what I want you to focus on. And so we focused on being human.
Yeah.
And caring about people and how we treated them. And then, the tools that they had, and then they figured it out. I remember a guy said, there was a guy that was a district manager, said, "We're kind of like Cheers, aren't we?" I said, "Yes, we are, exactly like Cheers."
I love it.
And that's who we are. And, and that's how it worked. And it still works today. And whenever we screw up, it's because we didn't get that right. Not because we made a bad cup of coffee, but when we've screwed up, it's because how we've treated somebody, when we've treated somebody poorly.
You also mentioned how to get people off the bus. And I think that's something that's really important, because sometimes we get desperate. We just need to hire people, and we make mistakes, and we're not always perfect. We make mistakes. We hire the wrong people. What things do you do to make it easy to off-board people? And I think that's go ahead.
It's communication, constant communication. It goes back to that. You're not waiting for performance reviews when somebody comes in. They're defensive anyway, aren't they? And you say, something, "Joe, you don't fit. Sorry, goodbye." That doesn't work. But if Joe has had constant communication about things that were working, and let's say the things that are not working just seem to be mounting up, then you're talking to Joe all the time. "Joe, this is an issue. Well, how can I help you get through this? Joe, we talked about this. This is just really, are you really fit here?" And Joe, usually what happens is Joe draws the 4 club and comes in one day and says, "I'm just not happy here." And Joe leaves, and sometimes Joe doesn't get it. And you have to say, "Joe, you really need to find something else to do with your life."
Yeah.
The important thing is love them, and love them as much going out of the company as you love them coming into the company.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just like this idea of like you say, that constant communication and opening the channels of communication to check in with them and give them these opportunities to talk to you, but also to do it from a place of compassion and not a place of like, "What are you doing to me in my business, man? You're screwing up." Like, "Hey, are you okay? What am I doing wrong?" Something like talk to me. And then if you do it from a place of like, "I'm mad at you," then you're just going to get the same thing in return.
You're going to get the pushback.
Exactly.
And they're going to be mad at you, and all of a sudden you're going to be missing $10 a day out of your cash drawer.
Exactly. I love it. Great stuff. So I want to give you an opportunity. This whole time I've been asking you questions, pulling that to layers in your journey. Is there anything, you're still living your life's work, right?
Yes,
I do. And again, that is I think I wrote it down, but it's to nurture and inspire people every day. I think there's a little bit more to your mission statement. But what's one thing that you want to communicate? One thing that is near and dear to your heart that is a message you want to communicate to the thousands of restaurant operators who are listening to this. Now's the time to get that out, to communicate that now.
Well, it all goes back to who you are as an individual. So the restaurant operator, the owner, who are you? What do you stand for? And how are you going to lead your organization? So, but the first step is figuring out who you are. Let's say that your values are you trust, you want to trust people, you want honesty, caring about people, whatever it happens to be. You have core values and you define those. Then you have to be able to live those within inside your restaurant. If your values are making lots of money, having everybody do what you want them to do all the time, you better reevaluate whether you really ought to be in the restaurant business. You might want to be, something else in your life.
Yeah.
And so I think making sure that who you are aligns with where you are and what you're doing. So that to me is really important. And, I don't care whether you're running a Subway or you're running a Dairy Queen or you're running the mom and pop restaurant on the corner. It's all about the relationships you build with the people that are working in your store and the people that you're serving. And if you show and act like you care about each of them, then they will show and care and act about you.
Yes, I love this.
It's about that simple.
I love it. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show to share your knowledge with us. And I'm going to have to get that second book, and maybe I can get you back on the show in a year or two. Who knows?
All right, Eric. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
It's been great. So before I let you go, it's a tradition here at Restaurant Unstoppable. One thing I love to do is to ask my guests, who is one or two people you really admire and respect and believe would make a great guest mentor like you've made for us today? That's how I found you. Chris Schultz called you out. Who's one or two people that you just love and respect and think have knowledge and great lessons to share on this platform?
A guy named Jim Donald, who was at Starbucks, took my place when I retired. And he's kind of not totally retired. He was the CEO of Albertsons, worked at Walmart, and when they got in the grocery business. And a guy named Jim Allen. And Jim Allen was also at Starbucks. He became the CEO of Tom's Shoes.
Okay. I was going to say, I was thinking of Jim Selman, but two Jims. Jim, I'm coming after you. I'd love to get you on the show. And you shared your mission on the show today. I just want to end today with sharing the Restaurant Unstoppable mission. Actually, before I do that, how can we connect if we want to maybe have you come talk? I know you're speaking around the country right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any other reason we might want to connect with you, but what's the best way to connect with you in the services?
Either through my assistant, Kathy Lewis, klewis at howardbehar.com, or write to me, hb@howardbehar.com, or my cell phone, 206-972-7776. And I will talk to anybody at any time. It may take me a while to get back because I'm a lot slower than I used to be, but I always respond.
That's incredible. Thank you for being so generous with that. And the mission statement, the way I want to leave you, my mission statement is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. And when I say transform the industry, it's making an example of people like you. And we'll transform the industry if we make knowledge accessible. And we can raise the bar on the industry by sharing values, by sharing knowledge, by sharing the ways to do things, and making this information collectively accessible. And I just can't say thank you enough for being one of the greats to take time for me and Restaurant Unstoppable and to let me make an example of you. It's how we're going to transform the industry. And just thank you so much, Howard.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. And there is no questioning. You are unstoppable.
Thanks.
Cheers.
If you enjoyed this video, please help us out. You can do it by liking, sharing, subscribing, and hitting that bell icon. It really helps out. And don't forget, there's a complete archive of every episode with show notes at restaurantunstoppable.com.